Welcome, and just so pleased that Frank Susini has joined us. StratoCube. He's an advisor. StratoCube is an advisory services company, and I've known Frank for a long time.
Many
And
years.
just a good person. He is certainly knowledgeable in his field. We're going to talk about Lean Six Sigma, and I'm hoping that Frank is also going to explain what it means that he's a black belt.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sean. What is a black belt? In order to become a practitioner in Lean Six Sigma, you've obviously got to go through a period of training. And the training involves certification, typically at 4 levels. You start off with white belt, you then move to yellow belt, then to green belt, and then to black belt. And as you progress through these different levels, the content becomes more technical, more complex, and the statistics involved also tend to become more complex as well. So it's a certification, it's an international certification. It's done under the auspices of the American Qualification Authority and various other quality authorities around the world. So once you're a certified Lean Six Sigma practitioner at the black belt level, that's essentially an internationally recognized certification.
And
I'll
Frank, just to
talk.
be clear, you are black belt certified.
I'm black belt certified, and on top of the black belt certification, I also have an AI certification specifically on Lean Six Sigma, and that is how you essentially orchestrate AI together with Lean Sigma to make the make journey much richer and of a higher quality for the client. So just for our conversation today, I've got a bit of an agenda. I do want to try and cover as much of it as possible. I will take questions as we go along. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the basics around Lean Six Sigma. I'm going to talk about physical, digital, and service phenomena because for those of you who may be familiar with Lean Six Sigma, it's often associated with the production and manufacturing environment. So the production of physical goods. But Lean Six Sigma has evolved over the decades to include digital processes as well as service processes. So even as diverse as dealing with process performance in call centers, for example. We're then going to talk about the cost of poor quality, go back into what is the difference between Lean and Six Sigma, because you'll notice that the title of the discussion is Lean Six Sigma. So it's a combination of both. So what is Lean? What is Six Sigma? I'm going to talk about methodology versus frameworks, the make phases, different data types. And the reason why I talk about data types is so that if you do have a process issue, we are not constrained by the type of data involved. And so just to give you a sense of comfort that we can deal with literally any type of data. I'll obviously expand on that when we get to that point. I'm then going to talk about the concept of hypotheses. Now, hypotheses sounds like a very scary word, but in fact, it's not really a scary word because making hypotheses or drawing hypotheses is something that all of us do every day. We're just not aware of the fact that it's called a hypothesis. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it's at the core of Lean Six Sigma. And then I'm going to give you two specific examples around stability analysis and capability analysis. Right, so I'm going to launch into it, beginning with an introduction. So I want you to think about your personal work environment. And I want you to think about one thing that really bugs you about one of your processes, something that slows you down, it frustrates you, and it could literally be anything that's wasting time, money, effort, even intellectual capability, anything that you wish could be fixed, all right? So think of that process in your mind now for a moment. And then once you've got that, we would then want, from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, to answer 3 specific questions, right? So how would you go about solving a process issue? Now, I'm going to ask you to interact with me at this point, and I want one or two of you to volunteer for your organization, for your environment that you're immersed in. What is a process-related issue that really bugs you, disturbs you, keeps you awake at night, causes issues for you during the day at the office, whether online or offline, remotely? So can I have one or two people volunteer their hands, raise their hands and say, this is an issue that I'm experiencing, and then we'll build on from there. So Sean, I can't see the hands, I don't think. So you'll have to moderate that.
We'll certainly bring them up. And
yeah.
Hi, Zakele.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning, Zakele.
I think from my side, I'm not too sure if it would be a process, but the authorization hierarchy
Yes.
from my end is.
Yes, authorization hierarchy. Okay.
Good one. Let's hear Nell Marie.
The frustration I've got is that normally the user departments do the evaluation of a tender or FQ. It takes normally a long time for them to complete it. And when it gets to supply chain, then there's a lot of rectifications we have to do. Sometimes we have to send the report back. So I don't think they really do justice.
Hi, Sean, it's Reshma. Thank you. My frustration is around creating documents. You know, I'm often required to draft documents in the organization, and just getting guidance from document management in terms of what that document should look like, whether it's a policy, a procedure. You know, there's such a large number of documents, a memo, a strategy document. It's just that guidance around what that document should look like in the organization, and not getting that right kind of guidance.
And I'm going to pick the tender one, because that's a very, very common process-related issue in procurement in many organizations. The way tenders are evaluated and then reverted back to the procurement or supply chain department, only to discover that there are issues that need to be rectified. Okay, so this brings up the first concept in Lean Six Sigma, and that is the concept of defects. Now, what is a defect? Normally when we think of defects, we think of, again, I'm going to go back to the production or manufacturing environment. Let's say you have a company manufacturing nuts and bolts, and they're producing bolts, and a bolt could have many, many different types of defects, physical defects. The length could be incorrect. The quality of the material could be incorrect. The pitch of the thread could be incorrect. There's lots of things that can go wrong with the production of a bolt, all right? However, and we refer to those as defects. However, in the broader scheme of things, a defect is something which is non-compliant with a customer specification, all right? So we have specified an evaluation process which has to deliver a certain outcome. It gets back to procurement only to find that it is defective. So there are issues relating to that evaluation which are incorrect. Okay, so I'm going to throw this question, that first question that's on the screen, how would you go about solving a process issue? I want to throw that open to the colleagues who are participating in this session, just to volunteer, quick thumbnail sketch, 1 or 2 points. How would you go about solving a process issue? Think specifically around this evaluation and the defects coming out of the evaluation process, and then also think generically, how would you solve a process issue? Right, throwing this open to the colleagues. Please, on a random basis, volunteer random thoughts. No such thing as right, wrong. Just want to collect ideas. We're just in an idea mode at the moment. How would we go about solving a process issue?
suggest, there we are, Mike has suggested identify the bottlenecks and then dispose of all those bottlenecks except the one, and thereafter manage the only bottleneck that is left.
Okay.
Zakwanda says cross-functional teams. Brian says identify the root causes. Mark all the way from Netherlands says define each step in the process. Penelope says map the process. Nelmarie says training on proper specifications.
Yes.
There, so you got a whole bunch of suggestions there. On,
so that's great. I've got lots to work with there. So the answer is yes, you're all right. Okay. So what you've actually done at this stage is you have generated a set of potential causes that could be at the root of the problem. I think it was that Brian that mentioned root cause analysis? Did I catch that right? Okay.
Yeah, yes, it was. Yeah.
So root cause analysis is at the core, at the heart of Lean Six Sigma. Now, here is the issue we face immediately. We have a lot of these potential causes, and let's say we have 10, 15, 20. We can't investigate every single one because then the process would take so long. So we need a way of narrowing down those root causes into the most likely root causes, the most potential root causes that we can then test statistically. So one of the things we need to do is we need to measure our processes. We need to measure what is going on. And those measures could comprise different things, okay? But essentially we need data because Lean Six Sigma is oriented towards analysis of data. So yes, whilst we can hypothesize what the root causes are, and we've got a potential range of root causes here, from training to to mapping processes to a bunch of things, we need to now measure. We need to actually get physical measurements and say, right, the process is breaking down at this point or at several points. Let's now test to see which one of these has the greatest impact on the overall output of the process. So what we are looking for in Lean Six Sigma is those critical few items or item and individual item that is having the greatest impact on the process output. Okay, so one is we need to understand what the process is, map it, understand its constituent components, understand the interactions between different entities involved in the process, so different departments, so your end users, procurement, it could be finance, it could be IT, there could be a number of players in that process, and then we need to measure all of those aspects of the process. And we've got objective measures to work with. So for example, if the issue, and somebody did mention it earlier on, is one of approvals, and we've got a hierarchy of approvals, and it's taking yay long to get the approvals you require, well, exactly where is that happening? And the only way we can identify that is to measure. Where does something start? Where does something end? So when there's a handoff from one approver to another one, how long does that take? So we need to measure those things. And the final question we want to ask ourselves is, what is an acceptable level of performance? Who determines that? How do we arrive at what is good and what is bad? And that introduces the concept of what we call Sigma level. And I'm going to unpack the Sigma level for you shortly. All right. Now, before we get into Sigma levels, I want to talk to you about the law of means. All right. In other words, the law of averages and what this means. Sorry, I couldn't help but to have a little bit of a play on words there and to use a little bit of a pun there. So very often when we try to fix processes, we go and take measurements or we have data to work with. And let's say we are measuring supplier delivery performance. and we're comparing one supplier against another one to assess the impact of their delivery performance on our internal processes, we might go and take an average of the one supplier and an average of the other supplier and compare those two averages and say, well, based on the average, this supplier is better than that supplier. Right? That's a very, very common thing that happens. However, herein lies the problem. If you look at this bit of a comical image that we have on the screen, we have a guy there that has a foot in a bucket of water, very hot water, steaming hot in fact, and a foot in a bucket of ice cold water. And so we could say that on average, the temperature is pretty much okay, because if we take 70 degrees plus 0 degrees, we get an average temperature of 35. That's a very comfortable temperature for us to work in, and we should be okay. However, while things might seem good on average, it doesn't tell us the full picture, because averages only tell us about a thing called location, but nothing about variation. So we could have one supplier whose average is close to the required delivery lead time, but individual deliveries are all over the place. One day, on one occasion, he might be a day late. On another occasion, 2 days early. Another occasion, 5 days late. Then another occasion, 3 days late. And that variation is causing a lot of problems to our internal needs. So let's say if you were an auto manufacturer, and you're working on a just-in-time principle, you would want deliveries to be exactly on time every time, all right, within a very, very small margin of variation. Whereas you can have another supplier who's consistently delivering, say, an hour late or 2 hours late, but the variation is so small that in actual fact, they are more reliable than the other supplier who seems to have a better average. Now, this is a very, very important concept in Lean Six Sigma. So in process terms, if we look at the tender process, we would need to understand averages as well as variation. And in Lean Six Sigma, we use a statistic called standard deviation, which is just a way to measure how far away from the average is our performance. And we can track that and monitor that both statistically as well as visually on graphs. And I'm going to show you later some graphs that show us that level of variation. So we start off with a list of potential causes. We narrow that down to potential root causes. We can then statistically validate those through a process of measurement, and then understand the process performance in terms of both location or averages, means, as well as variation, which is measured through the standard deviation to know, is this the supplier that's one day they're 5 days late, the next time they're 3 days early, the next time they're a week late, or is this the supplier who's 15 minutes late, 15 minutes early, half an hour late, 20 minutes late, 5 minutes early. So we want to understand that level of variation, because Lean Six Sigma is, you'll see later, aimed at reducing variation as well as improving the means or the average. Okay, so I mentioned that in Lean Six Sigma, we can deal with physical, digital, as well as service phenomenon. So what is a phenomenon? A phenomenon just simply the thing that we want to measure, the condition, the issue that we are studying in a process that needs to be addressed. In the example that you guys came up with, the phenomenon is the defects in the evaluation outcomes. So we have evaluation results that are defective in one or more ways, and we need to resolve those defects. So it's a specific problem, a variation, a defect, or an outcome that we are trying to understand, that we need to analyze and improve. It is as simple as that. So the good news is that we are not constrained to physical items. We can also consider digital processes. We can also consider service processes. We're really not constrained at all. And in fact, in the procurement space, being a very service-oriented space, there are many, many issues. I've got a slide that lists about 25 different potential things that one could study in the procurement space to resolve process-related issues. So, what are the key characteristics of a phenomenon? They have to be observable. In other words, we need to be able to measure them. We need to be able to detect them. We need to be able to quantify them. They must be related to the process that's problematic to you, the process that we want to resolve. And it must represent a problem to us. In other words, it is something that is defective, or something that we just simply want to improve. Maybe the performance is okay-ish, but it's not quite where we want to be. And that where we want to be can be measured by the sigma level, which I alluded to earlier on, which I'm going to also show you a slide on. And what does that actually mean? So it's very important to understand sigma levels in any process, because the sigma level is very often related to the quantities involved. What do I mean by that? Let's think about DHL. How many parcels do you think DHL delivers internationally in any 1 year? Okay, I can tell you it's not thousands, it's not hundreds of thousands, it's not millions or even tens of millions. It's running into the hundreds of millions and billions, right? So let's say you're delivering 1 billion parcels per annum, and you lose 1% of those, or 1% of those are damaged, or 1% of those somehow get stuck in the system and never get delivered. Is the 99% level of performance acceptable? Or what is 1% of 1 billion? It's a massive number. It's running into the many, many, many millions of parcels. If you're a brain surgeon doing brain surgery, what is an acceptable level of performance? Is it 95%? Is it 99%? Is it 99.9%? If it was 99.9%, how would you like to be that patient who's the 0.1%? So is 99.9% acceptable? If you're an organization that has a high number of purchase orders, consequently with a high number of invoices, what is an acceptable level of performance in terms of purchase orders or invoices which are correct first time, which don't need correction, which don't need subsequent intervention of some sort, which then loads your administrative support functions? Okay, so it's important that we understand what sigma levels are and what their impact on the organization. I've got a lovely table that that'll explain that to you. So in essence, a phenomenon then is the what that our Lean Six Sigma project is wanting to deal with, something that we need to fix. In the case of the tender example that was raised, we want to fix the level of non-compliance with the evaluation process because it is delivering outcomes which don't meet the requirements. We have a specification for the evaluation process, but when it is executed, the outcome doesn't meet requirements. Okay, so let's then talk about the cost of poor quality. Now, remember, quality is simply the degree of compliance with a desired specification. That specification can be determined by a number of people. It could be your marketing people, could be the engineering people, could be the finance person, could be the head of procurement. It could be anybody who's receiving an output, and that includes your external customers who are receiving an output of some sort that needs to comply with a certain level of quality, a certain specified level of performance, a certain specified level of quality. Now, in business, it's been determined that the cost of poor quality is anything between 15 and 30% of total business cost. I mean, imagine that. Imagine if we had, even if it was at the bottom end, 15%. Imagine if we didn't have 15% of business costs, how that could improve the bottom line of our businesses, and how that could improve, or how that could translate, for example, to profit share schemes, to bonus schemes, to schemes that ultimately benefit employees. So it's in our interest to try and identify those hidden costs so that we can eradicate them. All right, so what are those costs? What are those categories in which we can find these hidden costs of poor quality? Well, the first thing is internal failures. From a procurement perspective, it's something like having to reprocess a purchase order or an invoice that I referred to earlier on, restocking damaged goods, urgent last-minute sourcing. There's a plethora of internal failures that we experience in the supply chain environment, procurement, that cost us real money. All right. Then there's the external failures, things like late deliveries impacting production, rejected shipments, reverse logistics due to warranty claims, expedited freight, where we, for example, having to use aircraft to expedite freight deliveries versus the normal route, which would be, let's say, by rail or by road or by ship, depending on where the items are coming from. Then we have appraisal costs. What are appraisal costs? These are the costs related to understanding whether we are meeting quality requirements, inspections, audits, calibration of equipment, in procurement, supplier audits, goods receipts inspection, invoice to PO matching. Imagine if you lived in a world where every purchase order was perfect and where every invoice was perfect and was automatically matched to a purchase order. You could cut out that whole three-way matching process. I mean, I think accounts payable would be very happy to live in that world. Okay, and then there's prevention costs. Somebody referred to training earlier on. Process redesign, supplier audits rears its head again. Preventive maintenance, risk reviews, automated workflows. And again, on the automated workflows, one has to be very wary that you don't automate poor processes. So before one even engages in projects where you automate your workflows and where you do workflow management, one has to be absolutely sure that your processes are first working correctly before you automate them. Any questions so far? Does anyone want to raise an issue or raise a question before I move on to the next segment? I don't want to be doing all the talking.
Doing well so far, Frank, sincerely.
Okay, great. Everyone happy? All right, look, just raise your hand, please, Sean, if you would keep an eye on that. If anyone wants to ask a question, happy that that you do so.
Will do.
All right, so
thank you.
I alluded to the fact that Lean Six Sigma is a combination of Lean principles and Six Sigma principles. If you look at the history of the development of Lean and the history of the development of Six Sigma, you would see that there was some which originated in America, some which originated in Japan. There were some very notable characters like Edward Deming, Mr. Fisher, who had a huge impact on some of the statistics that support Lean Six Sigma. Mr. Ishikawa from Japan. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Ishikawa diagram, which is nothing other than a cause and effect diagram. So there were many notable leaders in their fields who contributed towards the development of Lean and Six Sigma over many decades, starting way before even the Second World War. Okay. Toyota was obviously a leader in this area and had a massive impact, as did Motorola from a Six Sigma perspective. And General Electric under Jack Walsh also had a massive influence on promoting and implementing Lean Six Sigma in General Electric. So what are the different approaches which are used by Lean and Six Sigma? Well, the fundamental focus of Lean is to eliminate waste in whatever form that is. That could be waste of material, it could be waste of time, it could be anything that constitutes a loss of inputs, all right, or even a loss of outputs. Whereas Six Sigma has a focus on eliminating or reducing variation. I spoke to you about the variation between delivery performance of those two suppliers. So we want to reduce those variations. Why? Because the more we reduce variation, the more stable our processes. And the more stable our processes, the better an underlying platform we have to ensure that processes are also capable. And I'm going to talk about the difference between stability and capability, because that's also core to Lean Six Sigma. A little bit later on in the discussion. The next thing is that Lean wants to improve flows in processes, how things flow from one point to another. Somebody raised the issue of debottlenecking. Debottlenecking is fundamentally a Lean principle. So if we have a process that keeps on getting stuck or delayed at a particular point, and in fact, it could even be multiple points, those are bottlenecks, and we need to do something about those bottlenecks to improve the overall flow of the process, and of course, as a consequence, the speed of the process as well. Whereas in Six Sigma, we are looking at accuracy and consistency. How accurate can we perform the same activities over and over and over again, to such an extent that we are now also becoming not only accurate, but we are also consistent. Accuracy really means how close to the desired level of performance are we. Think of an archer. I used to do archery at one stage, and a very keen archer. And there are two things you will look at. One is how accurate are you and how precise are you? Now, there's a subtle difference. Accuracy is about how close to the bullseye are you. Precision is how close is your grouping together. I could have a grouping that's quite far away from the bullseye, but they're all very close to each other. That means I'm very precise, but I'm not accurate because I'm way off the bullseye. I could be spread around the bullseye. So if I took an average of all the arrows and I could see the average is actually very close to the bullseye, I'm quite accurate, but my precision is off because I'm kind of spread around the bullseye. So in Six Sigma, we want to be both accurate, we want to enhance accuracy and precision, and of course, consistency. The focus in Lean is one of efficiency, and in Six Sigma, one of capability. I'm going to unpack that for you shortly. So the overall orientation in Lean is around the process as a unit, a definable unit, whereas in Sigma, it's not only the process, but also process data and performance statistics. So there's a huge data orientation, a huge measurement orientation in Six Sigma. Why? Because we want to be able to statistically prove, I won't say beyond a shadow of doubt, because we never do that. We work within confidence levels, but we want to be able to statistically prove that to a high degree of confidence, the process is performing well. Okay, so what then is Lean Six Sigma? I've been talking about Lean Six Sigma, throwing concepts at you, and let's look now at what do we actually mean by Lean Six Sigma. So I'm starting off with a very simple definition. It is just a methodology that employs qualitative and quantitative tools to improve processes. Later on, I'm going to talk about data, and we're going to look at both quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative means something you can measure. Qualitative means something you can describe. Okay, so Lean Six Sigma uses both sets of tools to improve processes. So the beauty of Lean Six Sigma is that it avoids things like, I'm just going to go with my gut feel. I'm going to take a shot in the dark. It's a thumbs up guess. I'm going to rely on my best guess. I'm going to use trial and error until I sort this damn process out. Okay. Or make solution by consensus. We're going to get a team together and say, right, what do we all think? All right. And we're going to come to a joint decision or agreement around how we think we should solve this process, and it avoids subjective decision making. Now, those are lovely words, but I can translate those into more important concepts. So going with gut feel is about reliability. How reliable is your gut feel? You might think that you might be spot on, but are you actually? All right. Taking a shot in the dark or a thumbs up. Essentially, you're playing the odds. You know, you should be going to your nearest bookie and placing your bets there rather, because maybe you can win some money. Maybe you might lose some money on sorting out this process. All right. So you're playing the odds. You are dangerously flirting with probability. All right. Relying on your best guess, that's just speculative. You know, I'm speculating that this is the issue. It may or may not be. I might be lucky. I might be extremely lucky on the 1 in a million chance that I'm right, but I'm still speculating. All right. Employing trial and error is just about randomization. It's a random thing. You don't know whether it's going to work. You might have to conduct 25 trials till you get to the right answer. You might be lucky and conduct 3 trials. You might have to conduct 100 trials. The problem with trial and error is that it costs money. Every time you're trying something, you're guessing or you're hoping that it's going to work, but it may not. And that trial costs you money. So we can't really afford this type of random hit and miss in a business. Solution by consensus. I want to tell you this is the most evil thing, both in business and politics. Why am I making this very strong statement? It's because solution by consensus is based on compromise. And we all think, oh, well, but compromise is great. I mean, I'm compromising, you compromise. No. What does compromise mean? Compromise means we end up with LCD. Who knows what LCD is? If anyone can quickly put up their hand, what is LCD? Think of your school mathematics.
Lowest common denominator.
Yes, thank you. Compromise is about getting to a point where we all agree on the lowest common denominator. All right. That is not the way to run a business. Definitely not. And then subjective decision making is about assumption. You know, I'm assuming that I'm correct. Okay. But well, am I? All right. So let's look at a slightly more technical definition about Lean Six Sigma. It is a structured, data-driven methodology, so highly reliant on data, that aims to eliminate defects, reduce variation, and improve process efficiency by applying statistical and process improvement tools and enabling, this is the big one, guys, objective, data-driven decision-making. We're not guessing, we're not hoping, we're not trying our best, we're not doing all the things that were on the previous slide. So this ultimately promotes, we have talked about data-driven decisions, understanding process behavior, reducing variation, eliminating root causes. Otherwise, why are we doing this? That's really the whole purpose of this. And of course, finding solutions to them. Customer-focused outcomes. One of the very, very first things we do in a Lean Six Sigma project is we do what's called the VOC, the voice of the customer. We sit and talk to the stakeholders to understand what is the issue they're dealing with. And once we've got all of that in plain language, we then convert that to what we call CTQs, which are those indicators we refer to as critical to quality. It must be something measurable. So I must take a descriptive input or various descriptive inputs from the client and convert those into measurable CTQs, critical to quality. Those are the things that we then base the improvement process on. So data-driven decisions means it is evidence-based. We're not guessing anymore. Understanding process behavior means we have an orientation towards analysis, so an analytics orientation. Reducing variation is about improving control of the process. Root cause elimination, diagnostics. So all of what we do is based on practical and statistically supported diagnostics. It's customer focus means it's value driven. We don't do anything that's not going to add value to the customer. You know, we don't want to get into a theoretical exercise and do things just because they look good and somebody might feel important or whatever the case may be. No, we want to do things that's going to improve and increase value to the customer. So we must be in any Lean Six Sigma project. That to me is the single most critical thing. It must be value driven. And then finally, continuous improvement or a Kaizen orientation. Kaizen really means we do small improvements at a time. We don't go for a big bang solution. Okay, big bang solutions rarely work. They're really reliable and they're really sustainable. All right. It's small, continuous improvements, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Okay, good. So, what is a Six Sigma process? We often hear people say, oh, we've got a Six Sigma process. Oh, no, we don't. We only Four Sigma. What does that actually mean? A Six Sigma process is one that operates with extremely high consistency and minimal defects. It's both stable and capable. I'm going to show you some graphs. And ultimately, a Six Sigma process is so good that it's almost perfect. You're talking about potentially only 2 defects per billion opportunities. We talk about opportunities in Lean Six Sigma. Opportunities just means that if you do something, there's a chance it can go wrong. That chance it can go wrong, we refer to as an opportunity. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but eventually once you get to become familiar with Lean Six Sigma speak, we get very comfortable with the concept of opportunities. Opportunities just means the number of times things can go wrong. Okay. And we need to also understand, therefore, for our process, and the quantities and volumes that are concerned, what is the right level of sigma that we should aim for? All right. Is it 6? Is it 0? Hopefully never 0. Is it somewhere in between? What should it be? What's appropriate? Okay. So here's a nice little table. It shows what we call the Z level or the sigma level, 1 sigma right up to 6 sigma. The yield and the DPMO, I'll explain what those are. Yield just means how many times are we getting things right, all right? A 1 sigma level means we're getting things right 68.27% of the time. A 6 sigma level means we're getting things right 99.99998% of the time. DPMO, I alluded to that in the previous slide, it just means defects per million opportunities. All right. Now, our brains struggle to think in millions. So what I've done is I've converted the DPMO level to opportunities per billion, per million, per 100,000, 1,000, or 100. Why am I doing that? I'm doing that because we don't always work in billions or millions, or sometimes even 100,000. So let's talk about purchase orders. You might do in your organization 20,000 purchase orders per annum, for example. But each purchase order may have 2, 3, 4, 5 lines on it, which are things that the supplier has to perform or deliver. So your 20,000 might become 50,000, might become 80,000, 100,000, for example. So what the sigma level says is based on the quantities that you work with, what should we be aiming for? Well, I'm not even going to go with a 1 sigma level because that's just way too low. But a 2 sigma level means that out of 100 attempts to do something, we are probably going to get it wrong 5 times, right? So out of those tender evaluations, if we do it 100 times, we're going to have 5 comebacks. By the sound of things to me, the person who raised that as an issue, it sounds like it's more than 5 out of 100 times. So I would guess that the sigma level performance for that tender evaluation process is probably closer to 1 or maybe even less than 1. You know, it might be 1 out of 2 evaluations which come to us are incorrectly done and we have to rectify things. You know, that might be a sigma level of 0.3, for example, very, very low. And objectively unacceptable. If we're talking about purchase order line items and we want to know how many purchase order line items were incorrect cumulatively over the period of a year, a 4 sigma level purchase order process might only yield 6 incorrect line items, whereas a 2 sigma level process will yield 4,500 incorrect line items. So now we can start getting a feel to say, well, for our process, for what's being delivered, what would be an acceptable level of performance? And you can use this table to help you start setting objective targets. Generally, what we do in any Lean Six Sigma project is whatever your current sigma level is, we aim to get at least a 2 sigma level improvement. So if you're sitting, say you have a process that's measured in thousands and you're having 317 defects per 1,000 opportunities, we'd want to increase your level of sigma from, say, 1 sigma to at least 3 sigma, so that you drop from 300 to 3 defects per 1,000. If you're the DHLs of the world that have massive numbers of deliveries of parcels, they're working up at this level. They're dealing with numbers which are measured in the billions. And so therefore, they would probably be wanting to operate in the 5 and 6 sigma level type of performance, because they can't afford 63,000 parcels to go missing. Even worse, if they drop from a 4 sigma level down to a 3 sigma level. Imagine losing 2.7 million parcels out of every billion. That's a lot. Okay, so we try and rationalize the targets that we set for our process based on this kind of table. So we take into account the quantities, the volumes that we are dealing with, to make it a little bit more practical. If I'm only having to do something 3 times per year, does it make sense to set a performance level of 75%? Because what is 75%? It's more than 2. Well, I can only be correct 2 times out of 3 times, or I can be correct 3 times out of 3 times. Well, I could even be correct 1 time or none times. Right. So we need to understand what are the numbers we're working with, the quantities of volumes, before we set those targets. Okay. Does it make sense? Does anybody have any questions on this slide? Because it might seem daunting, but it's actually not.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, I would like to just start to engage a little bit. I think you are certainly knowledgeable and passionate about this, Frank. I think you might be about halfway through the slides you'd planned, if I recall the agenda.
I'm actually more than halfway.
Just over halfway. Let's can we engage a little bit? I've got a couple of questions.
Let's do that. I'd love to take some questions, because there's a lot of concepts and theories and stuff that we're covering. Or let's try to relate it back to the workplace. And how does this affect me? What can I do to fix my processes?
So, Frank, maybe just the first question that I would have is, So this is a philosophy. This is a methodology for continuous improvement.
Yes.
Yeah. How does one implement this?
Okay.
And I'm asking this because I don't recall seeing that on one of your bullets.
Yes. Yeah, that's
so
right.
is this something where you as an organization, you do a project, and at the end of the project, then you've implemented it and you can measure your Z level and or is it just a philosophy? We everybody trains on it, and then we just implement aspects, on a kind of as needed basis, and just maybe give us some thoughts around that,
Question.
Frank, because I think there's real opportunity, but want to try get my mind around, somebody who's sitting here now, they head up a department of health in one of the provinces, and they feel that there's potentially some value in this. How do they wrap their mind around getting this done?
Yes. Okay. So the first thing is I need to have a problem. When I say it is me as the client in a business somewhere. All right. So I need to have a problem that's related to some process. Now, there's different ways you can go about doing that. If you have a certified Lean Six Sigma practitioner in your organization, the first thing you should do is go and talk to that person and say, listen, man, I've got this issue. I'm really not sure why we can't seem to get this right. Can't get to the bottom of this. Can you come and have a look for us? That person would then go and have a more detailed discussion, would perhaps look at the process, do an initial high-level process map, which we call a SIPOC, S-I-P-O-C, suppliers, inputs, process, outputs, and customer. So that's at a very high level, just to get a rough feel of what that process involves. And then it could be agreed to actually launch a project. Now, that would be a full end-to-end process improvement project, but there are also certain tools that can be used in a standalone basis. And those work and they're effective. So, for example, if I want to look at quality-related issues, I can then use the Ishikawa framework. And the Ishikawa framework says, I'm going to look at 6 things: man, materials, machine, measurements, environment, and something else, which I'm just forgetting at the moment. And I'm going to say, right, let's look at man, which is people issues. In that category, can we start identifying what some of the contributors are? And then we do the same with machine. Machine really means to any type of equipment. Could even be a computer system for that matter. All right. We often experience issues in computer systems, and then we can brainstorm through that to come up with a list of potential issues which are impacting quality. If it's a time-based issue, we have another tool which is called the downtime tool. It's just an acronym, and that each letter stands for a particular thing, similar to the Ishikawa framework. And again, we say, right, what are the things that are causing time-related issues in our process? Is it overproduction? Are we producing more than what we should be?
So, Frank, these kind of questions, I mean, when is that asked? How's that done? Is it a one-day workshop? Is it a little project that gets done and you call in some Six Sigma folk and they help with some of the analysis, and you take some time out with the team and
yes, it's exactly what you have to do. Remember that many of the tools that are used in Lean Six Sigma, you have to be trained in. So I wouldn't want to throw this at somebody who's had zero training in Lean Six Sigma or any of the tools, either in Lean or Six Sigma, and say, here you go off. Here's a book you can read quickly, and you can go and solve your problem. I want to show you. I can't see. Can you see me on the screen?
Yes, we can. We can.
Okay. So here's a little book that is my Lean Six Sigma
Pull
Bible.
it back a little bit. Closer to you? Okay. There. We can see it. Just when you've got the fuzzy background on, we can't actually see it. So just call the
How's
name
that?
out, Frank.
Sorry?
Call the name out, please. Read the name out of the book.
It's called Process Mastery with Lean Six Sigma.
Got you.
And it's
Process
by an
Mastery.
author called George Lee Sy, S-Y-E.
Right.
Now, this is how thick the book is. It's 900 pages.
Okay. Okay.
Now, to acquire that body of knowledge is going to take a long, long time.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
therefore, you don't just throw these tools at people and say, here's a tool, go use it. All the best. Hope you get your result that you're looking for. Okay, you need people to be trained in this. You need training.
Okay, so we're going to bring people in who've got
Yeah.
this training, and they're credited as at a Six Sigma level, and
Yeah.
all right.
And then they would run a project for you. Now,
Okay.
some organizations actually have, as part of their BI team, they have a person, and if they're lucky, there could be more than one person, who are actually certified Lean Six Sigma black belts.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And they could then have a chat with them and run the project for them. Alternatively, they need to then call somebody in who has that skill set and experience to be able to take them through a project. And
Okay.
projects don't have to be massively complex. They can be, right? They can be, but they don't need to be. Six Sigma can deal with various levels of complexity. Obviously, the more complex the issue, the greater the reliance on the tool set within Six Sigma. But it doesn't have to be an exceptionally complex issue. Obviously,
okay, so that's certainly one way to implement this is that you get somebody in your organization that's trained up in Lean Six Sigma, and they are accredited. They have a black belt, and yeah. Where would they go for training, Frank? Do they have to go to? You mentioned this is a USA.
Yeah,
American.
there are various bodies, and I can give you references. I can actually mail that to you, and then you can distribute it to the team who's online here. There are various bodies that do training in Six Sigma, probably
In South Africa, or is it?
No, internationally. Yeah, internationally.
Do they have to go overseas, or can they do that online?
No. You can do it all online. I mean, I did my certification online. I mean, everything's done online nowadays. All the training is done online. You know? And you can self-pace. You can do it at the pace that you're comfortable with.
Okay. So there's that's a great next step, is to just get that at least, and could they contact you, Frank, on that one?
They could certainly contact me if they need.
Yeah,
they
and you can give some feel for how much it costs and how long it takes, and those kinds of. Could you help out with that, Frank? Is that
certainly?
Okay.
Just to give you an indication, my certification took 2 years, but it didn't have to take 2 years, because it just so happened in that period I had 3 major surgeries, which put me flat on my back for quite a while. So I didn't have mobility, but so working on a computer was a huge.
Okay, so maybe a year to 2 years, but I mean that's reasonable.
Yeah, you can do it in less.
That can be done.
If you have the time, if you're not working, basically, you can do it in less than 6 months.
Okay, but now, this is why we're having this discussion.
Yeah,
99% of the people online do not have time. They are running around. You understand procurement. They're running around all the time, continuously chasing bids, evaluating specifications, anyway, you understand that space. So
so look, to me the thing is always one of focus. All right. What is my job and what is my focus? What should I be doing? All right. I can go and be trained as an airline pilot. I can be trained as a Lean Six Sigma specialist. I can be trained as 100 different things. To be able to have all these skills to do things in my job, but nobody has the time to do that, and it costs money. And therefore you get to a point where, and many companies do this, They just simply appoint consultants. They say, listen, we have a problem. It's a finance issue, so I'm going to employ a PwC, for example, who have finance specialists, and we want to do capital raisings, or we want to do project finance, and then there's an expert that can do that. Or I have a different kind of issue. It's a process issue. I get a process expert, Lean Six Sigma expert to come and resolve the issue.
Frank, I've got 2 polls that I put together as you were speaking. I'm just going to put the first one up.
2?
And let me just.
I didn't get that. You've got 2?
I've got 2 polls, online polls.
Oh, 2 polls. 2 polls.
That I put together. Okay, and let me launch this one. Yeah. And you should be able to see it, and you'll see the results. Everybody else won't see the results. And this is just asking, of all the institutions and the people online, is there anyone that has implemented Lean Six Sigma? And let's say that that could be, they've got somebody in their organization who's trained up. Anyone that has started or they're in process, anyone who's thinking about it, and anyone who says, well, maybe it's relevant, but we don't have anything planned yet. And the last one is just not relevant for us. Just to get a sense from the folk online now, what would it be? And we're getting a good number of people that are responding. Frank can see the results. I'll share this with everybody. We'll keep it going. And then I've got another poll that we can do after this, Frank, just on level of interest and see what the level of interest might be. I think that we need to get you back sometime.
Okay.
You've got a lot of content that you've covered, but there's still a lot more. And
it is indeed.
And let's see, Frank. While this is going, is there any sense in a department or a public entity doing like a 1 or 2 day workshop with you? So they put some time aside. Yeah. And I saw when you opened up, you've got like 200 slides here, and you did a little workshop with them. And at the end of that workshop, they would maybe take away 1 or 2 little techniques, but there is, at the end of that, there is a, yes, we need to do this more seriously, or there is a, I mean, would that be something that you would run? Is that?
Yeah, that's certainly something I can do for them. The training is not aimed at making somebody a Lean Six Sigma aspect. Expert, that's never going to happen in 2 or 3 days. Right?
Gotcha.
It is to enable leaders in procurement to be able to effectively do 2 things. One is to be able to converse at the level of the Lean Six Sigma expert, so that when they're talking about various statistical phenomena or results, they can talk kind of using the same language. They won't necessarily have the same,
have some frameworks and
depth of understanding, but understanding the framework. If we're talking DMAIC, what is DMAIC? What are the different phases of a Lean Six Sigma project? What happens in each phase? Why are we doing them? How is a Lean Six Sigma team constituted in the workplace? Who should be on it? Do we need a project sponsor per se? Do we need, and so it's understanding how Lean Six Sigma projects work in the workplace and how to become a meaningful key stakeholder on that kind of project. Okay.
All right, good.
And then, yes, they will learn a few techniques, a few tools that they can use on a standalone basis. Of course, they have, they should really be used in the context of a larger Lean Six Sigma project, because they have specific outputs that would then roll on to a next phase.
Okay. I'm going to close this poll shortly, folks. So just quickly give your last little votes in. And Frank, I guess part of that workshop would be to surface and to describe the problem.
Yes.
And what it is now.
If it's what I call an in-house type training environment, you could come with very specific issues that you are dealing with in your organization at that point in time. And one could talk around those very specific issues.
All right. So there's the results. So only 10% of the people online say this is not relevant. There are a few that have actually implemented, and I put that in quotation marks, some that have started, some that are thinking of it, but many are saying it may be relevant, but nothing planned at the moment. So it looks like there's a fair level of interest. I just quickly want to capture this, and then I'm just going to put another quick poll on, and let's see.
I think
is this useful for you, Frank?
Yeah, this is very useful. The question I would have is around the maybe relevant but not planned. The question I would have then is, how do you then solve process-related issues? All right, and how, let's say, confident would you be in the results that they're A, accurate, that they B, sustainable? One of the big things around Lean Six Sigma is ensuring sustainability of results. There's little point in doing a whole project and then the results aren't sustainable. Then you've literally wasted people's time and money. And we never want to get into that kind of situation.
Got you. Let's just see. I'm just going to quickly launch. I mean, this may be fairly similar to what we've got. Just the folk that are online, what would your level of interest be in getting more information, maybe doing some training, having a workshop? How would you rate your level of interest? And I'm quite keen to gauge the interest if we do ask Frank to come back sometime and maybe continue. That would be great. So a couple of comments that are coming through. Could we share the recording just quickly? Matlatsi, we'll put, with Frank's approval, we'll put this onto the YouTube channel. How much roughly for the training? Julia's asking. Penelope says that Udemy has a white belt course, which might be a nice place to start. More sessions are appreciated, Brian says. Nakwanda is KPIs and SLAs. Nakwanda, I'm not sure what you're asking there. Maybe you're welcome to unmute and just check. So let's see. We'll close this poll shortly, folk. Just the level of interest in this going forward. Okay, I'm going to close. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There it is. Share the results. Very high level of interest, Frank.
Yeah, you got about an 80% level of interest.
Yeah.
I'm excluding the bottom two levels there, moderately.
Yeah, sure. So that's pretty high. Okay. So I've been dominating this discussion for the last few minutes, Frank. Apologies to the participants.
No, that's good. That's fine.
Let's see. Any further questions? Anything else? That Udemy white belt course. Are you familiar with that, Frank?
Very familiar.
Okay.
The white belt course is literally an hour or two. It just gives you a very, very high level overview of the make, which are the 5 phases of the project.
Right.
And that's something that I would have covered here as well.
And my apologies if we've kind of stopped. Mike, let's jump to Mike and see. Hello, Mike. Welcome.
Hi. Sorry, I just have a question. Isn't Six Sigma really something that should be aligned to either a strategy like TPM or TQM? But it shouldn't really be standing on its own, because otherwise you are in a bit of a limbo.
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, if you look at the history of the evolution of Lean Six Sigma, some of its early roots were in total quality management, quality assurance, all of the aspects related to quality. And of course, Lean Six Sigma very much deals with quality. Now, in an ideal world, yes, you'd perhaps want Lean Six Sigma projects to fall under your quality program, but it's not necessarily always the case in organizations. Some organizations would definitely operate on that basis. If you look at the more sophisticated operations, for example, in production manufacturing, your automotive guys, and various others, that would be very much the case. So it depends on the needs of an organization and your infrastructural resourcing and focus, of course.
It's just that, sorry, if you look at the infrastructure development management system, which is something I'm concerned with,
Yes.
It is based on the plan, do, check, act cycle. But for the cycle to work properly, you need data. And if you read the Auditor General's reports on the state of procurement in South Africa, that is exactly what is missing. And I'm not talking about necessarily state procurement, but, oh, sorry, just national department procurement. I'm just talking about municipalities and so on. I mean, the Auditor General's reports are astounding when you look at how little information or how little data is available. And without that, you know, how do you implement a system that is supposed to improve on something if you don't have the information on which to judge the improvements that you need to make?
That's a fantastic question, because it leads to one of the most critical tools in Lean Six Sigma, and that's called DOE, or Design of Experiments. So Design of Experiments is a tool set that allows you to run improvement projects where you don't have the underlying data, but where you can generate data by running what we refer to as experiments. And experiments are really, okay, I'm gonna take a subset of the process, I'm gonna map it accurately, I'm going to measure now, create measurements, and then I'm going to run experiments to say, if I change this one thing, how does it impact this segment of the process? And we use the DOE tool set to generate data. So we may not have historical data, but that doesn't mean that we can't create data that we need for a project. So we then run DOE, we design experiments, we agree what we're going to be measuring and creating data on, and then we run ahead with that, and you know, from there the project flows. So the absence of data is not ideal, absolutely, obviously, because running DOE or running design of experiments costs money, takes time, resources, and effort. So that's not an ideal situation, but it doesn't mean that it will stop a Lean Six Sigma project from running, and that's why the whole area of design of experiments was developed. I can actually point you to a resource online from a company called Sigma XL, I think. They've got this lovely online tool, which is a device that launches a ball. But to launch that ball, there's several, let's say, design parameters that you can change on the launching device. And depending on how you vary those parameters, the ball is launched either further or shorter. And you're trying to find the optimum setting for all of these parameters on this launch device. And that's a great introduction to design of experiments, is what aspects of a process can I change, and what impact is it going to have on the result? So yeah, the absence of data, not ideal, but it's not insurmountable. We can handle it.
I guess this is also where hypotheses might come in, which you wanted to cover today, Frank.
Yes. Hypotheses are something which is, I'm taking a guess as to what's going to make a difference. And is my guess right or not? I want to give you a very, very quick example, if I may. Sure. A drug manufacturer who's producing, let's say, a new cholesterol drug says, we are making a claim that our drug is 30% more efficacious, in other words, effective, than existing drugs in the market. All right. So this is our hypothesis. Our hypothesis is that it'll improve your cholesterol by at least 30%. All right. So what is the hypothesis? It's really a position statement, a guess, a claim that can be tested. So it must be testable. If it's not testable, it's not a hypothesis.
Okay.
Can we test whether it's improving your cholesterol? Yes. We're going to run clinical trials and we'll measure how much your cholesterol drops by. All right. So that's really what hypothesis testing is. In a Lean Six Sigma context, we have very fancy, sexy statistical tools, which gets my blood absolutely excited when I use those.
Let's go down to the garden route.
Just be careful with these stats, because I mean there was a big Lipitor hoax when they tested Lipitor on a sample of 100 people, and in one case, the one produced 2 positive results, and in the other case, it produced 1 positive result. And they said that Lipitor was 100% more effective in reducing cholesterol than placebos. So that is how statistics can be manipulated.
The problem is not the statistics. The problem is the people who are using and interpreting it. Statistics is very objective. We use alpha levels, significance levels. We use p-values, and we use confidence intervals. We use a whole lot of statistical indicators, and those don't lie. You can interpret them incorrectly, or you can try and manipulate the data. Which is, by the way, in terms of development of drugs, this is not uncommon. It's been done many, many times.
Let's
just
jump
think
to
of the COVID vaccine.
Yep.
That's a good example for you.
Let's jump to garden route. Tabello, morning. You still with us, Tabello?
I think I'm covered. It's fine. I think my issue was the only place I've really encountered Sigma was in the engineering space, where I know they use it quite a bit, and the engineers get trained in it, and just trying to think that from a skills level, right? Do you foresee? I mean, we are more finance related people in this space, and do you see the transition to be able to learn this as a skill? Do you see, in terms of capacity? Do you think this is something that we in finance would be geared towards learning and should be useful in it? Unlike sending people there, you find that maybe the capacity is not there. Yeah, I'm not sure if it makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I understand exactly what you're saying. Look, capacity is always an issue. The minute you've got to go through any kind of training intervention, that's going to take time. It's going to cost money. And, I'll remind you of something that I said earlier on is, what is your focus? In business, we always talk to the issue of stick to your knitting. If I've got to fix motor car engines, it doesn't help me to go and do training on fixing jet turbine engines, because the application is very different and it's not relevant. Lean Six Sigma, definitely relevant in terms of process optimization in finance, but is it relevant and useful to you to apply that much level of effort to acquire the certification when you're probably unlikely to use it more than once or twice in your area? And that'll be it for the next 5-6 years. So, is it appropriate for you to go and get that level of certification? That's the question that only you can answer.
Good one. Let's quickly, let's go to Brian. Hello, Brian. Welcome. Is your mic and things working? Let's see. So,
not
Frank,
hearing Brian.
Would you be open to coming back sometime?
Certainly. There's lots more that I can share still.
I'm sure.
And I'd really be happy to share this with your community. I think there's certainly a lot of value to be had. If I look at the level of interest, there's a lot of interest in knowing more about Six Sigma. And I think ultimately people need to get to the position to say, is this something I can use to solve process-related issues in my business? And hopefully by getting this greater degree of exposure, they can then start answering this question for themselves. And then what they do thereafter is another thing. But they need to understand that, is this something that we can use in our business? Because we've been having the same problem for years and years now. For example, the lady who raised the issue, and my apologies, I don't remember your name, but who raised the issue of the tender evaluations. This sounds like something that's been going on for a long time. Why is that the case? Do we have to accept that as, the status quo? Can we change the status quo in some way? And how can we make our lives better for having done so? Because that obviously causes a lot of aggravation in the business. There's to and fro, you didn't do this correctly. You should be doing it like this, but we did like it because we thought, and you end up in these eternal debates that really don't create any value to the business, that just create a lot of frustration and unhappiness.
Fantastic. Thank you. I think it was Nell Marie, if I'm not mistaken. Mike, last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Sorry, no, I don't have a question. I just have an anecdote. The famous Hewlett-Packard order of harnesses from Japan, when they insisted that they only wanted 10 defective harnesses in 1 million. And the Japanese couldn't understand that. And when they supplied the harnesses, they supplied them a box with 1 million harnesses, or boxes with 1 million harnesses, and said, these are the harnesses. And they supplied them a separate box with 10 harnesses, and these are the defective ones.
When in fact we could have given you it with only 2, but you insisted 10, so we'll give you 10 which are defective. Wonderful.
Frank, just thank you very much. Great interest, high level of interest, really there is. Thank you for sharing so far. I think that would be good if we can get you back again. And please, folks, so you don't have to go through me. I've put Frank's cell number and his email address in the comments. Frank, if they abuse you and ask you for too much information, then you have a right to say no. Rather send me a request for quotation, and I'll come across and get paid for some of the work. But thank you, Frank.
Certainly. No, it's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Sean. Appreciate it. And cheers, everybody. I hope to see you again at a future session, and we can continue with the discussion.
Good one. Well done.